Hey, welcome back for another adventure in the shop. My name is Jack, and today we're back on the lathe. If you remember, a few weeks ago, I showed you how I took a couple logs that most wood turners would throw in the burn pile because they were cracked. Like this one. I don't know if hopefully you can see that. And most people would say, that's not worth even messing with. And we took those logs and we filled them with epoxy. And we turned one of them into a beautiful face. Well, this is the other one that I never did anything with. So we're going to throw this on the lathe and see what we can make.
Okay, so we got it mounted up between centers. First step is to make this thing round. Get our face mask on. And I'm going to use a bowl gouge. This wood is super, super hard. This is some hard oak. And it's a pain to turn. My biggest thing that I do is I try to take too much wood off at a time. I get in a hurry. And with this stuff, light cuts are the key. I'm not going to bore you making you watch me turn this thing down, so we'll skip ahead after we get it turned into a cylinder. Okay, now we've got it turned into a cylinder. We're going to start putting some detail in it. I've got an idea in my mind of what I want this to look like when I'm done. We'll see if the wood cooperates and we get it where I'm thinking. Well, that's one of the nice things about wood turning is you've got a picture in your mind, but sometimes the wood talks to you and you go in a different direction. So this is going to be what I call a honey pot, and we're doing the base right here. So larger base, a groove in, and then a rounded container and a lid. So we're getting that groove put in, and you'll see as we go along, it changes. And that's just because the wood had other ideas. This is end grain, and it's oak, and end grain is hard to turn in the beginning, but then when you use wood, oak, it's a bear, and it takes a long time. The secret is very, very light cuts. Here we're working up and trying to bring this thing almost, I guess, like a tulip shape off the base. So we're working that, and we got to make sure we leave enough wood at the top to make a top. So on this project, the base was the top of the log when I poured the epoxy into the cracks. On the vase project, I used that 1/4 inch or so of epoxy on the top as a rim on the top of the vase. On this one, I decided to take the epoxy off, and you can see there I just used a square carbide tool. I find carbide works better when I'm turning epoxy. So I took it off, and there you can see the basic shape of what I'm going after. Now I'm trying to decide, do I cut a tenon or do I cut a mortise? And I decided to cut a mortise on this. In hindsight, that was a mistake. So watch where we go. So I've moved the banjo and put in a short tool rest, and I'm going to cut a mortise on the bottom of this thing so we can get it turned around and separate the wood that we're going to use for the top and finish up the top of the container. Like I said, in hindsight, this didn't work out too well. So sorry that the camera angle isn't really great, but I'm cutting a mortise about 1/4 of an inch deep in this bottom, and we're going to attach it to the chuck. Okay, the mortise is cut, and we've repositioned and put on the larger tool rest. And we're going to do a little work on the top before I part it off. I'm going to put a tenon here so that we can get it in a chuck and get the final shape created. So we've got the tenon created. Now cut off tool to cut these two pieces apart for the base and the lid. Don't really at this point know what the lid's going to end up being. I have been thinking about it and I just don't know. So we're going to have to wait until we get it on the lathe and start turning it to see where it ends up. So we'll get these two pieces separated. So we got the two pieces cut apart, and we've got the bottom piece mounted back on the lathe so we can start hollowing this thing out. Looking pretty good at this point. Now hollowing these end grain oak, and any end grain really, is a pain. Rests a little bit high there, so let's take it down. I think this is why wood turners don't do a lot of end grain bowls. It is a bear. But I have found that my end grain bowls sell much better than my normal bowls. The grain pattern is just phenomenal in these things. It's unique, it's different, and that's what I try to do when I'm turning with everything that I make. I try to be different from everybody else. I don't want to make the same old, and that's one of the big mistakes you see on YouTube with all these videos that are showing projects that, oh, this one sells like crazy, and then at the next craft show, everybody and their brother is trying to sell that project, and it just becomes overwhelming. And that's one of the reasons why I don't do cutting boards. Yeah, cutting boards are fun, and nothing against you guys that do cutting boards, but I'm trying to do something that's different, and just doing a cutting board with a different pattern doesn't do anything for me. So here we're very slowly hollowing this thing out. It took forever. Very, very light cuts, being very careful. Maybe I should have drilled this thing out like I did with the vase. I don't know. Maybe I'll try that next time. So here we are with the inside hollowed out. Looking pretty good at this point. So we're going to do a little bit of sanding. I know how much you guys enjoy that. One of the big things that I want to stress is I see wood turners all the time that over sand their projects. This is 80 grit. I'm going to follow it up with 120, and that's it. You don't need to sand to 400 or 600 grit. If you read the instructions on your finishes, you'll find that they don't recommend that because it burnishes the wood, it closes up the grain, and it stops your finish from penetrating. Now, I use epoxy on all my projects, and I need that coarser sanding to get that epoxy to stick well. I've never had a finish fail, and it always looks good and smooth when I get done. And you'll see that at the end of this video if you stick around. So the base is sanded, and now we're going to put the other piece on and turn the top. And we've got a tenon on this thing, so goes on pretty good. Okay, next day. You can see I've got it marked out where the inside needs to be, and we're going to put a little, like a tenon on there, I guess, that'll sit down inside of our base and our jar. So I'm working on that. About a 1/4 inch, maybe 3/16 of an inch deep. So we'll get that cut. Still don't really know how I'm going to do this lid, but oh, and there we go, whipping off the lathe. So we'll get this thing mounted back on, and we'll continue to turn. Here again, my problem is I'm trying to be a little too aggressive with this wood. One of my downfalls when I'm turning, you know, you watch so many wood turning videos and they speed up the video and don't tell you, and I'm guilty of that too. I wanted to show you the whole process rather than just the highlights, so I'd speed it up, 4 or 5 times speed. And if you're not paying attention, you think you can turn that fast, and especially with this hard wood, doesn't work that way. You've got to slow down and take really light cuts. Okay, so the inside tenon is roughed in pretty good. Now I got to figure out what this lid's going to look like. And I'm thinking I'm going to bring this wood down and do like a rounded edge. I'm thinking maybe almost like a mushroom top on this thing. Not really what I was thinking when I started, but I think it's going to look pretty cool. Got tons of wood to work with, fortunately. You know, that's another one of my downfalls is I try to use every little bit of wood that I can on these logs, and I'm trying to get away from that. I'm trying to create a design. So what if I lose a little bit of wood? You know, most of these logs I've scavenged off of Facebook Marketplace, people just giving away wood. So I don't have any cost in this stuff, except for my time to go get it and haul it home. So here again, light cuts, working this thing down. Okay, so got the bottom of the lid turned and finished the way I wanted. So now we're turning this thing around and we'll cut all that waste wood off the top. And we'll finish this thing up. And at this point in the video, you know, we're about 13 minutes in. If you're enjoying this, would you consider subscribing to my channel? And leave a comment. Tell me what you thought of the video. Tell me if you like these end grain things that I do. You know, this was a learning experience for me. This is the first time I've turned a lidded container. And honestly, it wasn't as difficult as I thought it was going to be. So tell me what you think. Where did I make some mistakes? If you're an experienced wood turner, what could I have done better? And let's start a conversation. You know, it's all about learning how to do it, trying new and different things. Appreciate it. So we'll get this thing parted off, and I'll bring you back as we finish the top of this bowl, or this container. Okay, so the waste wood is gone, and now we're going to finish this thing up. Just round this thing into a nice point that's, I guess, a blunt point. Like I said, my thinking at this point is to make this thing look almost like a mushroom. So the lid hangs over the edge of the base and it's rounded. So now we're just going to round this thing up and bring it to a nice gentle curve at the top. The one thing I haven't mentioned so far is when you're doing end grain, especially really hard wood like this, you're sharpening your chisels all the time. Every 5 or 10 minutes, I'm over at the sharpener, sharpening these things. And I'll have to do a video showing you guys how I sharpen, because I don't use any of those expensive sharpening attachments or grinders. I sharpen my chisels on a belt sander, and works pretty good. I learned many years ago how to sharpen drill bits on a belt sander, and I can't afford $1,000 for one of those sharpening systems. So I started sharpening on the belt sander, and I'm pretty happy with it. So here we go. It's looking pretty good. And now we sand. One of the things I've learned is I use big sheets of sandpaper when I sand, and I hand sand, like you're seeing here. I don't put a sanding pad on a drill or use any of those fancy tools. I don't know. I seem to get the results I'm looking for just doing it this way, not spending the money on all those tools. I'm a tool addict, but I just can't justify that stuff when what I'm doing this way works just fine. And here again, we're starting with 80 grit, and then we'll switch to 120 grit. So I finished sanding the top, and now I put the base back on, and I couldn't jam it all the way in, so I just kind of lined it up as best I could. And we're just going to very gently turn this tenon off the bottom. Probably should have run the tailstock up to get it perfect, but I didn't. I don't know why. I just did it this way, and let's face it, it worked. And if it works, it's okay. There's so many things you can do on the lathe that may not be 100% proper, and the longtime wood turners would probably cringe. But if it works, hey, it works. Okay, we've completed the turning, and like all my other projects, we're going to coat this thing in epoxy. I only need just a few ounces to do the first coat on this. We're going to do a seal coat. As you can see, I've got them stood up on a couple pieces of PVC pipe. The nice thing is the epoxy doesn't stick real well to the PVC, so they're fairly easy to knock off. One of the tricks I do with my cups is I always mark where I need to pour each part of epoxy to. This is a 50-50 mix. So I think we got about 4 ounces here, so 2 ounces out of each bottle, which is way more than I needed. The trick with epoxy, guys, is make sure you stir it very well. Make sure you scrape the sides of your container and the bottom. Epoxy, when you first start stirring it, it's going to turn cloudy. Keep stirring until it clears up. And we're going to use a foam applicator. I like these foam applicators. I use brushes sometimes. I buy the cheap disposable brushes. But the problem with those cheap disposable brushes is many times some of the bristles come loose and get stuck in your epoxy, and you got to scrape them out. If you notice when I'm doing this, I'm not using rubber gloves because I'm not going to be touching the epoxy. I'm not going to get close to it, so I don't need to worry about that. Sorry for the horrible camera angle here. Unfortunately, I don't have anybody to help me run a camera, so I got to set it up, and the screens on the cameras are miserably small. But you can kind of see what I'm doing. I'm putting a very light coat on it. This is going to soak into the wood and seal up. I've got a few cracks that didn't get filled with the initial epoxy pour, and we'll have to work on those. So this seems to be one of my most popular videos, is how I finish my bowls with epoxy. So I'm going to let this play so you can kind of see how it goes, and we'll skip ahead here in a minute and show you after it's done. But you can get an idea. We're going to end up putting 3 coats of epoxy on this thing to get it where it needs to be. I find that tends to be the minimum that I need to put on any of my wood projects to get a good finish. One of the tricks is to sand between coats. This will sit for about 24 hours to set up. This is clear tabletop epoxy. And then I lightly sand it with 220 grit because it will raise the grain and there will be some rough spots, and you've got to sand those down. We're putting it on so thin that I really don't have problems with bubbles. I don't torch this generally. I haven't found the need for it. Now, we're going to do the outside of all this stuff. We'll do 3 coats on it. Then we'll turn it over and do 3 coats on the inside. And that's one of the reasons why this video is so late, because it took 6 days to get this thing finished. And here we are finishing up the first coat. Like I said, we're going to do 3 coats on this thing. I didn't film it all because it's just the same thing over and over. Kind of pointless in my opinion. But there it is. And here's the finished product. Turned out really, really nice. It's a beautiful piece. Here you can see the inside. A couple little imperfections on the inside. I may pour a little bit more epoxy on that bottom to cover that up. But hey, another beautiful completed project. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe. Leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Hope you enjoyed it. Beautiful oak honey pot.